Did you think Tom Hanks in Castaway needed some more sunscreen and also a talking robot companion? Well, now you've got Finch. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watcher Pass, and I'm here to talk to you about Finch, which is coming to Apple TV Plus on November 5th, 2021. It's a new Tom Hanks movie. Apple TV Plus already had a Tom Hanks movie in Greyhound, but now they have a new one. This one's not World War II. It's jumping in the future. It's kind of post-apocalyptic. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the film. I'm going to talk to you about things I like, things I didn't like, and about the ending. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers. If you don't want to know anything about the film, it comes out on November 5th, 2021. You can check it out on Apple TV Plus and then come back and watch it, or you can read my review on watcherpass.com, which is much more vague. But if you don't want to know what happens, if you don't want the ending spoiled for you, then I would bounce out now. But if you do want to know what happens, if you want to find out if Tom Hanks and the dog both survive in this post-apocalyptic world, then let's keep going. So in Finch, you have Finch. Finch is the main character. It's Tom Hanks plays Finch. He is I guess a robotics engineer or mechanical engineer. He's a brilliant scientist, tinkerer, however you want to call it, who is living by himself after it appears that the world has ended. There's extreme weather events. There's harmful UV radiation. He has to kind of stay indoors most of the time, and then he can go out at night, and also if he's covered. But other than that, or he can be in this like radiation suit, kind of like a space suit, except a little bit more thrown together. So the world is dangerous. So Finch lives essentially by himself with a dog, and he kind of goes out and scavenges for supplies. He has this really detailed map of all the places he's been. So he scavenges for supplies for himself and his dog and this new project that he is developing. And that project turns out to be a robot, a helpful robot called Jeff that Finch is building in order to teach and then eventually help take care of this dog because the world is dangerous. That is the crux of Finch. If it sounds similar to maybe like I Am Legend, it is pretty similar to I Am Legend, except the enemies aren't vampires. The enemies are UV radiation. And also there is another character in this, and you've got Jeff the robot. But it is a similar feel. You got a similar look of deserted places, of like a society that has collapsed quickly, and of kind of danger around every corner. So you can definitely think of it like an I Am Legend, or like Castaway. If you want Tom Hanks to kind of steal the scene and be his most Tom Hanksy, except this time he's talking to something that's talking back. There you go. Those are both examples of what you can expect with Finch. So things I liked about this film. First is it's Tom Hanks and the dog. I mean, what is there not to like? You get lots of Tom Hanks time because it's mostly him by himself. There is another character that comes eventually, Jeff, but for the most part, it's Tom Hanks. You get Tom Hanks on the screen to yourself with a dog. I mean, that is like the ultimate combination. It's fun to see Tom Hanks, by himself. He kind of, as always, he steals the scene. He steals the show. You want to watch him. He's so compelling to watch. And now he has a puppy dog that you can look at as well. So it's the perfect way to get your attention and keep it. The second thing I loved about this movie, and you kind of need this in a film where there aren't that many characters, it has really good world building. The world that Finch and the dog and Jeff reside in does feel like a legitimate post-apocalyptic world. They have all sorts of interesting kind of thrown together UV technologies. They have suits that they kind of put together with UV blockers. They have solar panels. They have weather alerts. They have ways to extract water and food and things like that. It does feel like a very lived-in world, and I really liked that aspect as well. You don't really know a ton of what happens or how this happened, but you can kind of piece together the elements because it does such a good job of showing just how this triplet survive in this strange world. It was nice because it kind of kept introducing new dangers to you throughout the film. It's kind of implied that he can't be out in the sun, but there are instances after where he kind of puts his arm out in the sun and he gets like massively burned because of the UV radiation. Or, there's instances where he has to travel at night and then you can go around at night, but then there's other dangers as well. So the film does a really good job of establishing the world at the start, and then adds more layers as you're watching and as you kind of get more comfortable in this place. And the third thing I liked is the effects. This film has a lot of really great effects. You kind of expect effects in this type of film, in a film where there is massive weather events and this kind of post-apocalyptic world where you have a city that's kind of burned out, or a city in this case that's abandoned and kind of left to dry out. And the effects are really good. They do not break your suspension of disbelief. They're not subtle because there are massive weather events, but they are well done. And they feel very big budget. This feels like a big budget movie that is now on Apple TV Plus. And the last thing I really love is Tom Hanks and a dog. I mean, it's Tom Hanks and a dog. You cannot not like Tom Hanks and a dog. So things I didn't like. The first is the slow pace. This film is very slow, and I am someone that doesn't mind slow films. This was slow even for me, and it's not just slow. I mean, this was slow even for me. The crux of this film is kind of a road trip as they are making their way across America to try to get to San Francisco, and so that has a certain amount of just kind of a certain lackadaisical quality because they're on the road and they're stopping to scavenge for supplies, and they don't have much of a impending doom or some sort of thing they are trying to outrun. And so the film just feels like a very leisurely paced movie. And so without anything else, especially at the start, without some sort of driving force, it doesn't really make it that exciting. And it just kind of makes the film feel very lazy. Lazy is the wrong, I mean, it's not a lazy film, but the film pace feels very lazy. The second thing I didn't love is it kind of feeds in with the previous point. This is a very uneventful film, despite the, I guess, apocalyptic overtones and despite the dire circumstances. The film itself, there's just not that much that happens. They establish the world. Tom Hanks leaves in order to go to San Francisco. They drive for a bit. They learn a little bit. They scavenge a little bit. There is a threat or two, but they are not that dire and they don't stick around very long. And then that's essentially it. I mean, I'll get into more in the ending, but that's basically what the film is about. And so that combined with a slow pace just makes it feel like a film that, despite having Tom Hanks, it didn't really keep my interest after the initial world building part. I really loved the start. I thought the start was fantastic. And towards the end, it gets interesting again, but the middle just dragged. And it really kind of was a surprise to me because I thought I was just going to be hooked this entire film, and I wasn't. The third thing I did not love, and this I think took away a little bit of my overall enjoyment, is Jeff. And that's not to take anything away from Jeff. He's funny at times. It's interesting to see this kind of almost childlike robot figure learn about the world and try to learn from Tom Hanks. But I think what I didn't love is that Jeff was not super compelling on his own. And so when he was there, it was basically taking away screen time from Tom Hanks. And I just wanted to see more Tom Hanks. I wanted like an I Am Legend type scenario where it's just him for 2 hours commanding the screen. But here you had Jeff. That led to a partitioning of his screen time. And I didn't love Jeff enough to make up for that sacrifice of time with Tom Hanks. And so I know it's a weird thing to say, but it didn't feel like he added a ton to this overall film, other than some funny aspects and some, kind of silly things where he put them in danger because of what he was doing. But overall, he felt like kind of a hindrance to this film. And the last thing I didn't love is the ending. I'll get into that after we talk about it. But yeah, the ending, I didn't love the ending either. So overall, this film, so in the end, so basically what happens in this film is Tom Hanks he's at his outposts digitizing books and digitizing the world's knowledge. And then there's some sort of storm that's going to come through. And so he decides now it's time to pack up. I got to go to San Francisco. So he packs up, he gets Jeff booted up. Jeff is now, fully working and starting to learn, and they drive to San Francisco. And like I said, the film is mostly a road trip. So towards the end, they are about 18 hours away from San Francisco. And they find a spot that has low radiation for some reason. You don't know why. I guess they describe the atmosphere as like a Swiss cheese. So maybe this is, I guess, not a hole in the Swiss cheese atmosphere. It just felt very random. It felt very convenient. But it was an interesting way that they noticed that they were there because there were butterflies flying around. Presumably butterflies couldn't survive in the high radiation areas because they would just instantly zap up. So they see some butterflies, so they know, hey, we're in a low radiation area. So they stop, they make camp, they kind of hang out for a little bit, and you get some more revelations about the past. And so one thing you find out is that this dog used to belong to this little girl that was killed by I guess a marauder or just kind of a random scavenger when they were looking for supplies. So this girl and her mother were looking for supplies. They came upon another scavenger who kind of freaked out and shot them both. And this girl had this dog, and that dog then became Tom Hanks's dog after he went to explore and see what was happening. So it seems like the dog and also that scenario kind of reminds him of how fragile life is. I just wish we would have gotten it at the start. It's kind of weird to have it right at the end because that's a pretty big scenario and it's a pretty big reminder of just how, what emotional relevance this dog has. I wish it would have happened earlier. I understand why they put it at the end, but it did kind of feel weird to just reveal it right towards the end of the film. So Tom Hanks, we also find out that he has some sort of radiation sickness from just being exposed to the sun. I mean, it's just going to happen, and so he's dying. And so part of the reason why he made Jeff is for Jeff to take care of the dog. Jeff has some interesting things built into him to help take care of the dog. Like he has a built-in can opener, which was clever. And so at this low radiation point, Tom Hanks basically is like, "This is a nice place. I'm not going any further," and then he dies. Bye, Tom Hanks. Very sad. I was very sad when he left. So Jeff builds him a funeral pyre, like a sweet old school fantasy kind of funeral pyre. And then he kind of starts to take on, I guess, the Tom Hanks role. He looks after the dog. He realizes he has that can opener built in because he's kind of trying to figure out what to do now that that Finch is gone. And he's like, what would Finch do? He would feed the dog. And so he like grabs a piece of food and like tries to figure out, and he sees he has something on his chest. So he puts it in there and it opens and he feeds the dog. And so then he starts to kind of take on Finch's role, and also the dog trusts him at this point. Before, the dog didn't like him that much, but now that he's feeding him, as you'd imagine, the dog likes him. So they head to California. They finally make it because they're only 18 hours away. It's not that far of a drive. So they make it to California. So it kind of ends with Jeff and Goodyear, who's the dog, on the Golden Gate Bridge, looking out at the bay and how beautiful that area of the world is. And they see that there's all these postcards and messages from family kind of trying to use the Golden Gate Bridge as a base to interact. So it's like, "I'm fine. I went to live in Marin," or "miss you," things like that. So Jeff leaves a note, marker, reminder of Finch on the bridge. He kind of draws on the bridge, the three of them, and leaves that as kind of a memento on the bridge for them. And they see all these messages from loved ones. And Jeff has this line. He says, "Looks like we're not the only ones who came this way. You think they're still out there? Well, there's only one way to find out." And then it shows him kind of leaving. And it's weird because Jeff is a robot. He doesn't have much emotion in his face. And so when he says this line, like, "You think they're still out there? There's only one way to find out," it has this really weird, sinister overtone. I know it's not supposed to, but just the way that his robotic expression was, I think maybe our innate distrust of robots, it felt like a sinister thing, like he's going to hunt them down. I know he's not supposed to, but I also don't know what he's going to do. And so that is kind of my dislike of this ending, because it felt like at the start Finch was doing something important for humanity. He was digitizing these works, he was digitizing these books, he had everything kind of automated so that the robot, he was a master of robotics, so his robot helpers would cut the books, digitize them, upload them to some sort of repository, and he was preserving knowledge. He was doing something for the benefit of humanity. And then he made this robot that is just basically supposed to take care of his dog. And you don't know what this robot's going to do. And so, like, I felt like Finch would have done more for humanity. He would have made Jeff the new archivist. He would have made Jeff continue to archive this knowledge, make sure it's preserved, help people out, things like that, rather than have Jeff just basically take care of the dog and his own work end. And then when Jeff says, we're going to go find the other people, like, what is he going to do? He's going to go up to them and they're going to be terrified of this robot that is, now hunting them down. So I didn't really understand that ending. I guess maybe it's supposed to seem like now Jeff is evolving. He's going to go help people. He's going to be a good person and maybe a light in this world. But I don't know. I didn't get that from the overall movie, and it felt like kind of a leap to get to that conclusion. And I also felt like Finch himself would have been better utilized to have Jeff continue his role, take on that archival aspect, and kind of better humanity rather than be kind of a new wandering nomad that's hunting people down. So overall, look, like, it's a good film. It has a really good start. I liked the ending part. I liked when Tom Hanks was kind of hanging out, even though nothing was happening. the middle just kind of drags. So overall, I think this is a rental. I think this is it's on Apple TV Plus. You're not going to be disappointed if you watch it, but it is a little slow, so you might lose focus here and there. But overall, look, it's Tom Hanks with a dog in a post-apocalyptic world with some very good effects. So there's worse ways you could spend your time. I enjoyed it. I don't think it's amazing. I liked the other Tom Hanks movie on Apple TV Plus, Greyhound, a lot more. But you know what? It's still not a bad movie. And look, if you wanted to relive your Fallout 4 fan fictions, this is kind of the closest you're going to get to a movie adaptation until they make a Fallout movie, which I'm sure they will. It's probably going to happen. Maybe this was supposed to be a Fallout movie, and then they just said, hey, you know what? Let's just have Tom Hanks come in and we'll change it up a little bit. It does feel a little video gamey, but overall, I think it's a good movie and I think it's enjoyable. It's not great. So again, that's my review of Finch. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. And also check out my other content. I've got other reviews, interviews with various people, unboxing videos, and a weekly movie recommendations. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure to put on that sunscreen and take care.